No one expected a woman who ruled television for 30 years to reach a point where friends speak about her in lowered voices. A name that once meant strength and charm is now tied to 20 rehabs, countless arrests, and moments that even Hollywood refuses to replay. Her story never moved in a straight line. Some days, she rose like nothing could break her. Other days, everything collapsed without warning. People remember the red carpets, the perfect smile, the hit shows, and the fame. But what they don't know is how often she cried alone, how often she tried to fix herself, and how many times she said she would start again. At 64, Heather Locklear stands in a place no one ever thought she would reach, caught between the life she built and the life she struggled to control. This isn't just a celebrity tragedy. It's a journey filled with pressure, heartbreak, hidden battles, and a slow fall that shocked even those closest to her. Her past unfolds in pieces, each one showing a different side, one that the world rarely sees. Stay with us, because in the next few minutes, we will uncover the truth behind Heather's most painful chapter. Her story doesn't open with applause or magazine covers. It begins somewhere quieter at the edge of two very different worlds. One was the world she proudly built across decades, glowing with television lights, loyal fans, and roles that made her a household name. The other was a world she never wanted to meet, a slow-moving shadow that followed her from room to room, waiting for the moment her guard slipped. Heather Locklear stood between these two realities for years, long before anyone outside her inner circle sensed the change. In those early stages, the shift was almost invisible. She smiled at cameras, delivered polished interviews, and walked red carpets as if everything still belonged to her. But behind each bright moment, a quiet fracture deepened. People saw the confident actress. Heather saw some else signs that her balance was slipping. And the cruel part was that she couldn't point to a single moment where it began. It wasn't one mistake or one heartbreak. It was a slow unraveling, thread by thread, happening beneath the costumes and makeup. There were nights when she would pause in front of her mirror, not as a star, but as a woman desperately trying to recognize the person reflected. Her expression carried stories she never shared. The exhaustion around her eyes didn't come from long working hours. It came from holding herself together for far too long. Fame had once wrapped around her like warm light, steady and reassuring. But with time, that same light became harsh, almost blinding, until she no longer knew whether it was lifting her up or burning through her armor. As the years passed, people noticed the charm, the talent, the presence. They didn't notice the moments when she forced a smile, even after spending entire afternoons fighting tears. They didn't see her gripping her own hands tightly under tables, grounding herself when anxiety pulsed through her body. They didn't hear the silence in her home once the cameras went away, the silence that gave her too much space to think, too much room for pain to grow. What made her story so tragic was how quietly everything changed. There were no grand warnings, no dramatic scene where she collapsed in front of a crowd. Instead, the struggle crept in softly. A restless night became a restless week. A moment of doubt became a lingering fear. The weight of expectations she once carried with confidence became heavier each year. She tried to stay steady, but the pressure pressed harder than the smile she used to hide behind. And yet, through every crack forming beneath the surface, Heather kept trying. She tried to show up for work, even when her heart felt hollow. She tried to be present for the people she loved, even when her mind pulled her in too many directions. She tried to rebuild herself piece by piece, believing that one normal day might slowly lead to another. Those attempts were not dramatic or loud. They were small, private efforts that no one applauded. But they were some of the bravest moments of her life. Her downfall didn't begin with headlines. Those came much later. It began with quiet collapses, folded notes she wrote to herself, promises she couldn't keep, the ache of wanting help but not knowing how to ask for it. She entered rooms filled with light, but carried shadows that followed her everywhere. These shadows weren't enemies. They were reminders of unresolved wounds, heartbreaks, and pressures she buried long ago. This is where her tragedy truly began. Not in scandal, not in arrest records, not in rehab admissions, but in the slow erosion of a woman who had spent decades being strong for everyone except herself. She had lived in a spotlight that millions admired, yet the darkness behind that light tightened around her life, little by little. And still, she believed each sunrise might bring a softer landing. She woke up with hope more often than people realize. She tried again and again, even when the world thought she was falling apart. That persistence was not weakness. It was proof of how deeply she wanted to stay afloat. Her decline was not a sudden fall. It was a long journey shaped by pressure, emotional wounds, public expectations, and years of carrying burdens she never spoke of. This was the beginning of a tragedy that shocked her fans and devastated those closest to her, a tragedy built not on a single disaster, but on countless days where she fought battles no one could see. This was the darkening path she walked, step by step, long before her story made the news. Summary of overall tragedy. Her downfall did not happen in a single explosion. It unfolded like a slow-moving storm that no one recognized until it was too late. Heather Locklear's tragedy is not the story of a spoiled celebrity losing control. It is the story of a woman who spent decades giving more than she ever received, carrying pain that grew heavier as the world continued to see only her beauty, her fame, and her success. What the public witnessed at 64 was merely the final shape of wounds that began forming long before the cameras captured her worst moments. For years, her life looked carefully arranged, structured interviews, polished appearances, and performances that earned her national admiration. People believed her world was made of comfort and privilege. But fame can be deceptive, a stage where appearances often hide the truth. Heather's tragedy lived behind closed doors, in quiet moments when she stood between her past and her present, uncertain of how she had drifted so far from the woman she once knew. Her downfall was not only emotional, it was also structural. Every stage of her life carried pressures that built on top of each other. During her peak years, she worked endlessly, moving from one role to another without the space to breathe. The industry loved her consistency, but stability came with an unspoken price. She had to stay perfect. She had to look perfect. She had to behave perfectly. And she had to protect an image that never allowed her to break, cry, or fall apart. When a person is expected to be flawless for too long, the smallest crack begins to feel like the beginning of the end. This burden shaped the later years of her life more than people understood. Heather had always been disciplined, hardworking, and focused. But discipline also meant denying herself softness, rest, and vulnerability. She learned to appear composed even when exhaustion gripped her body. She learned to smile when she felt disconnected inside. She learned to act strong because the world never permitted her to be anything else. Her tragedy, therefore, was not sudden. It was a quiet escalation, the kind that builds through heartbreak, professional expectations, failed relationships, and personal battles. The glossy magazines never printed the truth. She spent years fighting her own mind, her own heart, and her own memories. And when those fights became too heavy, the world saw the consequences only through arrest reports, rehab admissions, and headlines that reduced her struggles to entertainment. Behind each public incident was a deeper, older wound. Some heartbreaks never heal. There were betrayals she never forgot. There were losses she carried silently because she did not want her daughter or her family to worry. And there were days when she felt she was slipping out of her own life, unable to control the emotional tides that swept in without warning. Her long, complicated battle with substance abuse was not a sign of weakness. It was a response to pressure that had gone unaddressed for years. People often forget that addiction rarely begins with pleasure. It begins with pain. Heather's pain came from places she never shared publicly, from a sense of falling behind in a world that demanded constant perfection. She tried to numb the weight of those expectations, not because she wanted to escape, but because she desperately needed relief from the intensity of her own thoughts. Her family watched closely as she moved from recovery to relapse, from stability to chaos, trying to support her each time she stumbled. Her daughter, especially, became a quiet anchor in her life, grounding her with patience and unconditional love. But even strong love cannot always silence internal storms. Heather's mind had become a battlefield where hope and fear met daily, each fighting for control. What makes her tragedy even more heartbreaking is the contrast between her public image and her private reality. To millions, she was a television legend, confident, radiant, and untouchable. But in private, she was fragile, uncertain, and constantly rebuilding herself after emotional collapses that no one saw. The woman people admired on screen was only one version of her. The woman who struggled after the spotlight faded was the one who carried the weight of everything she had lost, everything she had tried to protect, and everything she feared the world would discover. Her journey became a symbol of how deeply a person can suffer even while appearing accomplished and admired. It showed how fragile success can be, how easily pressure can twist into despair, and how quickly a strong spirit can weaken when it is not allowed to rest. At 64, Heather stands as a reminder that even the brightest careers can be shaped by darkness no one sees. Her tragedy is not just about addiction, arrests, or public collapse. It is about the long-term emotional cost of living under constant pressure. It is about a woman who gave the world her talent while quietly losing pieces of herself along the way. And it is about the painful truth that fame does not protect anyone from heartbreak. It often magnifies it. Her life, now seen through the lens of her deepest struggles, is not a tale of failure. It is a lesson about vulnerability, endurance, and the silent battles that shape a person long before the world notices something is wrong. Childhood and early personality. Heather Locklear's story begins long before the red carpets and television sets, in a quiet neighborhood where her laughter first echoed through sunlit rooms. She was born into a family that valued appearances, achievement, and the subtle pressures of expectation. Yet beneath the surface of comfort, small fissures hinted at the complexities to come. Even as a child, Heather carried a brightness that drew people toward her, an effortless charm, a radiant smile, and a curiosity that seemed larger than her small frame. But that charm was paired with a sensitivity few noticed, a quiet awareness of the world's weight far beyond her years. From an early age, Heather seemed to sense the duality of life, the part that was visible and praised, and the part that remained hidden and unspoken. School days brought achievements, applause for talent in performances and social interactions, yet the mirror of her home reflected a different truth. She watched adults navigate stress, disappointment, and unfulfilled dreams, internalizing lessons in resilience and caution. Her childhood was dotted with moments of wonder and joy, yet shadows hovered quietly. The first whispers of insecurity, the first hints of perfectionism that would later define her career. By her teenage years, Heather's personality had begun to crystallize. She was determined, driven, and aware of the impact she had on those around her. Friends admired her energy, teachers noticed her focus, and yet she often felt an inner tug between who she was and who she felt she needed to be. In private, she questioned herself, wondering if her best could ever be enough. That tension, the desire to shine, and the fear of faltering followed her like a silent companion, shaping choices that would define her adulthood. Heather also displayed an early understanding of performance not only on stage, but in life itself. She could adapt, charm, and present herself in ways that gained admiration, learning to navigate social situations with a finesse rare for someone her age. But this skill came with a price. It planted the seed of self-consciousness, the idea that her value was tied to perception. Behind the laughter and light-hearted conversations, she carried a subtle weight of proving herself, of being loved for the version of Heather everyone could see, rather than the one she kept hidden. Yet in those early years, there was also an undeniable strength. She approached challenges with determination, embraced learning, and found ways to turn curiosity into opportunity. She loved acting even then, practicing lines, imagining characters, and losing herself in stories far bigger than her own life. That passion was both refuge and calling, a hint of the future that would demand everything she had, while offering a stage where her talent could shine. Even as the early signs of struggle quietly emerged, Heather's childhood was marked by resilience. Her personality balanced light and shadow, joy and caution, curiosity and caution. Those early experiences planted the foundations of both brilliance and vulnerability, setting the stage for a life that would oscillate between public adoration and private hardship. They shaped a young girl who was as perceptive as she was radiant, as ambitious as she was fragile, a combination that would become the defining paradox of her existence. Her early personality, full of contradictions, carried the first echoes of the challenges she would face in the years ahead. It revealed a complexity beneath the surface of charm, an inner world full of dreams, doubts, and resilience. In understanding Heather as a child, we glimpse the roots of both her incredible success and the quiet, persistent sorrow that would follow her into adulthood. Career rise. Heather Locklear's entrance into Hollywood was quiet, almost unassuming, but it carried a force that few could ignore. In the late 1970s, she began with small television appearances and commercial work, a young woman learning to navigate an industry that demanded both resilience and adaptability. These early roles were minor, yet they offered her a stage to practice the charm and poise she had cultivated since childhood. Every smile, every line delivered, revealed the presence of someone who understood both performance and perception. Her first breakthrough arrived when she joined Dynasty, a show that defined the era's television glamour. Heather's role was brief but memorable, showcasing a subtle intensity that hinted at her ability to command attention without shouting for it. Producers began to notice her unique mix of beauty, intelligence, and timing, a combination that made her stand out in a crowded field. Audiences responded immediately. She had an uncanny ability to bring depth to even small moments, making her more than just a pretty face on the screen. Then came T.J. Hooker, a role that would cement her name in the public consciousness. Acting opposite William Shatner, Heather embodied Officer Stacy Sheridan, with a charisma that balanced toughness and vulnerability. Fans adored her for this mix of strength and relatability. Critics praised her for a naturalism that was rare among young stars. Her performance was both calculated and effortless, a reflection of years spent learning to read rooms, manage expectations, and present herself with unshakable grace. By the mid-1980s, Heather's career trajectory was clear. She was no longer an emerging talent. She had become a leading figure in American television. Offers came in faster than she could respond, each one reinforcing the image of a woman in total control of her career. Yet beneath the surface, the pressure to maintain perfection intensified. Long hours on set, public scrutiny, and the weight of growing fame began to shape the contours of her life, even as she ascended professionally. Heather Locklear's career rise was not just about talent. It was the manifestation of discipline, resilience, and a childhood spent mastering poise under pressure. Each role, each scene, was a building block of a legacy that would make her a household name. But it also marked the beginning of a relentless cycle. Public adoration paired with private struggle. Acclaim shadowed by an inner unrest that fame alone could not soothe. Peak fame and public image. By the mid-1990s, Heather Locklear had become an icon of American television. Her role as Amanda Woodward had transformed her from a talented actress into a household name, and with it came a public fascination that few could comprehend. Fans adored her sharp wit, commanding presence, and the intensity she brought to every scene. Magazines featured her on covers, talk shows invited her to share her insights, and photographers chased her every public appearance. She had reached a peak that most actors only dream of, yet the very fame that elevated her also began to weigh heavily. Heather's public image was carefully crafted, yet it remained authentic enough to feel relatable. Viewers saw a woman who was confident, stylish, and independent. Someone who could dominate a boardroom scene on screen, yet laugh off camera effortlessly. But the boundary between Heather Locklear and Amanda Woodward blurred in the eyes of the public. Interviews often focused less on her craft and more on her persona, amplifying the pressure to maintain perfection in every gesture, every smile, every word. She became a symbol of both aspiration and scrutiny. Behind the glamorous facade, the constant attention left little room for privacy. Every decision, from fashion choices to social interactions, was analyzed. Fans idolized her, but critics dissected her every move. In public, Heather maintained composure, yet inside, the relentless spotlight began to create tension. There were moments when the applause felt distant, when the flashing cameras seemed intrusive rather than celebratory. Fame had become a double-edged sword, one that demanded brilliance while ignoring human vulnerability. Despite the challenges, Heather's influence was undeniable. She shaped television narratives, inspired aspiring actors, and left a mark on pop culture that endured. Her face became synonymous with confidence and intensity, a reference point for the era's television drama. Yet, amid this acclaim, subtle signs of strain started emerging. Interviews hinted at fatigue, tabloid stories whispered about stress, and the private battles she fought quietly grew heavier. Heather Locklear's peak fame tells a story of extraordinary achievement intertwined with hidden costs. The world celebrated her brilliance, but few saw the shadows that followed her everywhere: the isolation, the pressure, and the constant expectation to be larger than life. At this pinnacle, she stood tall and captivating, yet the weight of her public image foreshadowed the struggles that would later dominate headlines. It was a moment of brilliance tinged with vulnerability, a prelude to the personal tragedy that lay ahead. Love life and marriage. Drama. Heather Locklear's personal life often mirrored the intensity of her on-screen roles, but in real life, the drama came with deeper consequences. Her relationships were closely watched by the public, turning moments that should have been private into headlines and rumors. Marriages, breakups, and the search for stability became a constant narrative thread, as fans and media alike tried to decipher the woman behind the glamorous image. She married Tommy Lee, the drummer of Mötley Crüe, in 1986. Their union was electric, fueled by passion and mutual admiration, yet it was far from easy. The world saw the glitz and excitement, but behind closed doors, tensions simmered. Their different lifestyles, clashing personalities, and relentless media attention created a fragile foundation. After just a year, the marriage ended in divorce, leaving Heather to navigate heartbreak in the glare of public scrutiny. Later, she found love again with Richie Sambora, the guitarist from Bon Jovi. This relationship brought hope of stability and shared understanding, yet challenges persisted. The pressures of celebrity, coupled with demanding careers, often made maintaining intimacy a struggle. Though moments of happiness existed, the relationship eventually ended, highlighting the recurring theme of love, interrupted by circumstance and expectation. Heather's love life, while public, reflected deeper emotional truths. She sought connection, stability, and understanding, yet fame and personal struggles complicated every step. Friends and family witnessed her longing for normalcy amidst chaos, and even small betrayals or disappointments felt magnified under the public eye. Through it all, she tried to hold herself together, to find meaning and balance between heart and career. These relationships shaped more than just her romantic history. They influenced her emotional resilience and her later struggles with trust and self-worth. Each heartbreak, each failed marriage left a mark, quietly layering onto the pressures of fame, addiction, and public scrutiny. Her story shows that even in the spotlight, love can be fragile, and even stars must navigate the storms of the heart like everyone else. Addiction, arrests, public breakdown. Heather Locklear's struggles with addiction became painfully visible as her personal life and career collided under relentless public scrutiny. What began as a private battle gradually erupted into headlines, arrests, and interventions, exposing the fragility beneath her glamorous image. Her journey through addiction was not a sudden fall, but a slow, relentless erosion of stability and control. The first signs were subtle. Friends and colleagues noticed mood changes, moments of withdrawal, and erratic behavior that clashed with her vibrant public persona. Alcohol, prescription medications, and the pressure of sustaining fame became intertwined, creating cycles that were difficult to break. Behind the camera, Heather faced battles the public could not see, moments of desperation and self-doubt that echoed through the quiet hours of her life. By the late 2000s, the struggles became unavoidable. Multiple arrests, often related to DUI or domestic disturbances, shocked fans and intensified media coverage. Each incident added layers to the narrative of a star spiraling out of control, and the headlines rarely left room for compassion or context. The legal battles, court appearances, and mandatory rehab stints painted a picture of a life caught between addiction and accountability. A constant tug-of-war she fought under the spotlight. Rehab became a recurring theme. Heather entered treatment more than 20 times over the years. Each program represented both hope and failure, a chance to reclaim her life paired with the harsh reality of relapse. Friends and family became witnesses to a cycle that seemed impossible to escape. Temporary stability, public praise, and then another downward spiral. Even in recovery, the emotional toll was immense, leaving scars that no therapy could immediately erase. Yet, even in these darkest moments, Heather's humanity shone through. Her attempts to regain control, to confront her demons, and to rebuild connections revealed strength often overlooked amidst sensational headlines. Her breakdowns were public, but her struggles were deeply personal, a reminder that addiction does not discriminate, and even the brightest stars can fall into the shadows of despair. Heather Locklear's story of addiction, arrests, and public breakdown is more than a tale of celebrity scandal. It is a human story of vulnerability, resilience, and the relentless pressure of living life under constant observation. Each incident was a chapter in a larger narrative of pain, courage, and the unending search for redemption. Daughter's emotional impact. Amid the public chaos and headlines, one story often remained quietly in the background. Heather Locklear's daughter, Ava, and the weight of witnessing her mother's struggles. Growing up with fame and scandal in parallel left Ava in a delicate and complicated emotional space. The home that should have been a haven was often a stage for uncertainty, fear, and moments of heartbreak. Ava's early years were filled with normal childhood joys, but they were shadowed by instability. Court proceedings, rehab visits, and news coverage became part of her reality, shaping her understanding of her mother, not just as a parent, but as a figure under siege. The attention Heather received for arrests or health struggles often overshadowed the personal pain her daughter quietly endured. Ava, in her own way, was forced to navigate a world of public scrutiny, learning resilience at a tender age. The mother-daughter relationship, like many others affected by addiction, carried moments of profound love intertwined with tension and worry. Heather's attempts at recovery were also attempts to protect Ava from the emotional fallout, but the weight of fame, misfortune, and repeated crises inevitably touched her daughter's life. Family gatherings, school milestones, and simple daily routines were often tinged with anxiety, leaving Ava to process complex emotions that most children never encounter. Yet, through it all, the bond between mother and daughter persisted. Ava witnessed her mother's struggles and her efforts to rise again, learning lessons in empathy, patience, and courage. She became a quiet observer of resilience, seeing firsthand the human side of the headlines. In many ways, Ava's story reflects the ripple effect of public tragedies. While Heather's life was splashed across tabloids, her daughter carried the emotional truths in private, silently navigating love, fear, and hope. Heather Locklear's personal struggles, though widely publicized, are inseparable from the impact on her family, especially her daughter. Ava's experiences serve as a reminder that behind every public figure's story, there are unseen lives profoundly affected by the highs and lows of fame. Her journey illustrates the personal cost of addiction and heartbreak, emphasizing that the true tragedy often extends far beyond the spotlight. Heather Locklear's life feels like a delicate mix of triumph and heartbreak, a reminder that even the brightest stars can struggle in silence. At 64, she stands in a complicated space between the legacy she built and the pain she continues to face. Her journey is not defined only by the headlines or the difficult chapters. It is also shaped by the strength she still tries to gather, the hope she continues to hold, and the love she shares with the people closest to her. Her story teaches a quiet truth. Fame does not protect anyone from emotional battles. Behind every celebrated face may live a private world of fear, pressure, and unspoken pain. Heather's tragedy is not only about what she lost, it is also about the courage she shows each time she chooses to begin again. If this story moved you, stay connected with us. More powerful journeys, more untold truths, and more real stories are on the way. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your support helps us bring deeper, honest narratives to you every day. Thank you for watching, and until next time, take care of yourself and those you love.